Hello students, in the last lecture we were on this particular slide when there is inflationary gap. So the topic which we have covered was the inflationary gap. So I'm starting from that particular topic only so that you can link today's recorded lecture. See, inflationary gap arises when AD is greater than AS. Okay, as I already told you, as you can see in the pictorial presentation, that aggregate demand is more and aggregate supply is less. Now, if I want to represent graphically the ADAS and want to show the inflationary gap. So similarly, first and foremost, here it is given AD is equals to C plus I. That is very much basic formula. The AS is equals to C plus S. Now, extending the AS, what I will get? Extending the AS, this is your particularly AS graph. So this is aggregate supply. Okay, students, that is aggregate supply, that is equals to C plus S. Now AD is equals to C plus I, where they are intersecting, that is the point of equilibrium, point E. Okay, where it is full employment equilibrium. But as I already told you, inflation is always above the full employment equilibrium. So if you can see now, if there is full employment equilibrium existing at point E, now if AD shift his positions from this particular point to this particular point, you can see the movement of AD. The AD has moved from this particular position to this particular position now. So when there is movement in the aggregate demand, when aggregate demand is changing at that particular point, again, when they are intersecting, new equilibrium will arise. The new equilibrium will arise beta at this particular point where the AD and AS are again intersecting with each other. As you can see, the AD and AS are again intersecting at a particular point. Name it as particularly, suppose I am naming this point as E1, which is the new equilibrium point. Okay, now that particular AD, that is AD2, which has shifted, maybe because of certain reasons. Now the gap between this is known as what? Inflationary gap, that is GE, which is known as the inflationary gap. I also told you that the inflationary gap is also known as excess demand, and it is also known as over full employment equilibrium. Both names can be given to the inflation. Okay, it is also known as over full employment equilibrium. So this is the particularly definition as well as the diagrammatic presentation of inflation. As you can see in the diagram, inflation has occurred, AD has changed its position, and it is also considered as demand pull inflation. Why it is known as demand pull inflation, students? Because AD has changed, and due to AD, excess demand has occurred, and ultimately inflation has been caused. Now moving on to the causes. Now, what are the causes of this particular thing? First, as I already told you, beta, AD is equals to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Okay, C is consumption expenditure. So, in order to increase AD, consumption expenditure will increase. Second, rise in government expenditure, that is G. Increase in exports, and here also you can write decrease in imports, which is not mention in the slide, so you should mention decrease in imports is also a reason that AD is increasing. Okay, then there is more supply of money in the market and ultimately rise in the private investment, as you can see, that is high. So these are the factors which are responsible for what? Which are responsible for causes in the increase in the uh, causes of inflation. Now, what is the effect of demand on the price? First of all, as I already told you, that price has increased. That is the first effect of inflation. Second, what is the impact on output? Output will not change. One thing, remember, economy has already achieved its full employment equilibrium. So there will be no change in the output. Output is totally consumed or output does not increases, what is the effect on employment? Again, employment also does not has any effect because we have already achieved full employment equilibrium. What we have achieved, students, we have already achieved full employment equilibrium where no person was unemployed. So when all person are employed and we have already achieved full employment equilibrium, so there is no point of any change in the employment level. So one thing you have to remember, whenever inflation occurs, there will be change in price, there will be change in output, but there will be no change in output and employment. Means the price will change definitely, but output and employment will not change. Okay. See students, this is a recorded session. The advantage is that you can pause and you can make the notes there and there. After completing all the notes, just send me the scan copy of notes. Those students who are not sending the scan copy, they will not getting the internal marks assessment. I will be judging internal assessment on this basis, that whether you are listening the video and you are making the notes from this particular video. So after the completion of this video, you have to send me a scanned copy of the written notes. So make sure you make the notes. Okay. Next, what is the effect on profit? Firms enjoy abnormal profit because price has increased. Cost has not increased. Price has increased. So ultimately, they are enjoying their abnormal profit. On consumers, they are the losers because their real income falls. Ultimately, if the prices are increasing, the real income of consumer falls. Now the things are getting costlier before it was. On the economy, it will leads to boom condition in the economy better. Okay, these were the impact of aggregate demand. Now let us understand deficient demand. As you can see, now the aggregate demand is less and aggregate supply is more. But as I already told you, we will not change the aggregate supply. Again, aggregate demand will only change, but rather than moving in upward direction, now the AD will go in downward direction. You will be understanding with the pictorial presentation in the upcoming slides. So let us understand the deficient demand. First and foremost, as I already told you, that there is two sector model. So AD and AS are intersecting at this particular point that is being given on the slide, that is point E, which is considered as the equilibrium point, and this is fuller employment equilibrium. Now, if I want to explain deficit demand, students, so deficit demand occurs when the AD changes its position, but AD is not increasing this time, AD is decreasing this time. So AD will change the position, but not now in upward direction. AD will change in downward direction, or AD will move towards the downward. Why? Because there are many reasons related to this. I will explain. So here, as you can see better, AD is shifting from this position to the position which I am just drawing on the particular case. You can see AD has shifted from this particular position to this particular position, and it is intersecting the aggregate supply at this particular position. That will be your new equilibrium point, students. This is your new equilibrium point, suppose E1. But the gap between this parallel gap between this AD1 and AD2 is considered as deflationary gap. Okay, AD1 shifts downward to AD2. Okay, as you can see now, it's very clear that AD1 has shifted from this position to AD2. Okay, students, as you can see, there is downward movement of aggregate demand, and this downward movement only causes what? Deflation in the economy. This is known as deflationary gap. Okay, now moving on to the causes of deflationary gap. What can be the possible causes? Now you have already seen the causes of inflation, so the opposite will be the causes of deflation. Similarly, take the example, if AD formula was C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So when inflation was increased, there was inflation, every component of AD was increasing. But now it will be opposite. The every component of AD will start falling. As you can see, first is fall in consumption expenditure, that is C. Then it is fall in government expenditure. Then it is fall in exports. Then it is fall in money supply, and then it is fall in private investment demand. Okay, so this is again being the reasons. One more reason, as you can see, is X minus M. So if exports have fallen, so imports have increased. This can be another reason that AD is falling. So when AD falls, these are the particular reasons. Okay, now what will be the impact on different thing? When inflation was there, price was increasing. So when deflation is there, prices will fall in the economy. Now, on output and on economy, first and foremost, there will be unsold inventory and output will be started getting declining. Productions will start getting stopped. It's just like recession going in the economy where there is no employment opportunities left and the productions have been stopped. Next is, in case of employment, there will be involuntary unemployment, means workers want to work. Voluntary unemployment was when the worker is willingly leaving his job. But involuntary unemployment, beta, when worker is able to work and willing to work, but he does not finds any work, then he is considered as involuntary unemployed. So at the time of deflation, there will be involuntary unemployment. That is a very simple case. Okay, at the time of inflation, there will be involuntary unemployment. Now what will be the effect on profit? Firms will suffer huge losses and there will be no profit because deflation is going on. Second, what will be the effect on consumers? Effect on consumers will be, consumers are the gainers as their real income increases. And second, what will be the effect on economy? Economy will be in a stage of recession. It will be at the stage of depression as we are facing now in pandemic situation. Economy is at recession. You have heard about the news of GDP being going by 23% lower than the previous particular current year quarter. So in this case, what is happening? Our economy is not in the development stage. The economy is at recession stage. We are facing huge unemployment and the case of that. So it can be considered as deflation or depression in the economy. Okay, so these were the particularly inflation and deflation. Now let us understand the difference between both inflationary gap and deflationary gap. First, let me explain with the meaning. AD is more than AS at full employment level, and deflation, AD is less than AS at full employment level. Means when AD is moving up, then there will be inflationary gap. When AD is moving down, there will be deflationary gap. Second, impact on price. Inflation always causes rise in price. As you can see, always inflation leads to increase in price. Deflation always causes a fall in the price level. So that is the impact over the price. Next is impact on the economy. Inflation causes boom condition, as I told you, and deflation, D for deflation, then D for depression. So deflation is causing depression in the economy. Okay, so this is the basic difference between the two. Now, how can I correct this situation of inflation or deflation? Or rather than, how can I correct the situation of deficit demand? Deficit demand is considered as deflation and excess demand is considered as inflation. Now, how can I cover this situation of inflation as well as of deflation? Okay, what central government and central bank can do to overcome the excess demand as well as the deficit demand? Now this topic is very much interesting, students, because this topic you have seen in money and banking chapter also. Okay, some of the related topic you have seen in money and banking, so you will be correlating with that. Okay, first, central bank. I will be focusing on monetary policy. See, RBI has control over the monetary policy of the country. They don't have the control over the fiscal and taxation policy, which the central government has. Okay, so central government has its own tools. Okay, and RBI has its own tools to cover the situation of inflation and deflation in the economy. Now let us understand first monetary policy. Now what is the meaning of monetary policy? Monetary policy is regarding the money supply and availability of credit. Again, it is under control of RBI. Monetary policy is under control of Reserve Bank of India. Okay, so this monetary policy and fiscal policy is regarded as, or it is regarding taxation and expenditure policy, and it is under the control of government, students. Okay, so these two policies we will discuss in this particular lecture only, that how these policies are used to cover the situation of inflation and deflation. Okay, monetary policy is adopted by central bank of the country, यहाँ पे RBI, and fiscal policy is adopted by central government of the country. Okay, so central government is always there to look out this. So let us first talk about some monetary policy tools. Now, these you have already studied in money supply chapter. If you remember, quantity and qualitative items. So bank rate, SLR, open market operation, cash reserve ratio, margin requirements, moral suasion, credit rationing. The last three are qualitative tools, okay, which we have studied in money and banking. And the first four are what? First four are your quantitative tools, which are responsible to cover the deflation and inflation situation. Now let us understand this one by one. First, in the case of inflation, we both have to decrease the supply of money. See, सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट को भी सप्लाई ऑफ मनी डिक्रीज करवाना है और आरबीआई को भी मनी सप्लाई करना है, डिक्रीज कराना है. एंड इन केस ऑफ डिफ्लेशन बेटा, we both have to increase the supply of money. अगर डिफ्लेशन चल रहा है, रिसेशन चल रहा है इकोनॉमी में, सो दोनों को ही, चाहे वो सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट हो चाहे वो आरबीआई हो, both have to increase the money supply in the economy. So here understand the cases which we will discuss in deflation and inflation will be just opposite to each other. What effect will inflation have? Just opposite effect will deflation have. Okay, so let us talk one by one. First, talking about the monetary policy. As I told you, first is instrument is bank rate. Now it is that rate of interest at which central bank lends to commercial bank. Okay, whenever commercial bank needs the loan, central banks will give you the loan, but they are charging a rate of interest that is bank rate. Now, I also explained you repo rate in money and banking. Now, what was repo rate? Repo rate, that rate, it is that rate. Again, RBI is lending, but here RBI will lend for a short-term period against some securities. In bank rate, students, RBI lends for a long-term period and without any security. Means the central commercial bank does not have to give any security against that loan. But if they want to go for repo rate, so they have to give security to the central bank. Now, how this bank rate, repo rate can affect it, and how reverse repo rate also. Now, see, if I am having excess money, being a commercial bank, take for the example, I am the ICIC bank, okay, and I have excess of fund. Now, being a bank, where should I deposit my excess amount? अगर आपके पास एक्सेस अमाउंट होता तो आप तो बैंक में जमा कर लेते, एफडी करवा लेते, यू वुड हैव डन लाइक दिस वे। बट अगर बैंक के पास ही एक्सेस अमाउंट है तो वो किसके पास जाएगा? सो हियर द बैंक विल डिपॉजिट देयर मनी टू सेंट्रल बैंक, and central bank will now pay interest on it, and that interest is known as reverse repo. Reverse repo is that rate at which bank put their short-term excess liquidity with the RBI. Okay, so bankers bank is what? RBI only. So RBI के पास रख लिया तो अब RBI उस पे reverse repo देगी. Now, what is the particular tools? In inflation, I have to increase the bank rate. Again, during the time of inflation, if I'm increasing the bank rate, it will discourage commercial banks to borrow. Demand for loan will fall. And ultimately, what will happen? The money supply will decrease. During deflation, better. During deflation, I will reduce the bank rate. If I have reduced my bank rate, this will encourage the particular commercial banks to borrow more, and ultimately demand for loan will increase, and this will increase the money supply in the economy. So in inflation I have increased from 10 to 12, and at the deflation time I have decreased from 10 to 8. This is the case of particularly bank rate. Similarly, the case of beta repo rate and reverse repo rate. At that particular moment, as I told you, of inflation and deflation, in that case also, talking about the repo rate and reverse repo rate, inflation period, it will be increasing. Repo rate also will increase and reverse repo rate will also increase. And coming to deflation also, repo rate will decrease and reverse repo rate will also decrease. So these three rates we have discussed. What is the effect? Now, how to learn that what will be the effect? See, I for inflation and I for increase. So at the time of inflation, I have to increase my bank rate, I have to increase my repo rate, I have to increase my reverse repo. But during the time of deflation, D for deflation and D for decrease, so I have to decrease my bank rate, I have to decrease my repo rate, and I have to decrease my reverse repo rate. This is the effect of inflation deflation with the help of bank rate and repo rate and reverse repo. Now, what are open market operations, students? Open market operation refers to buying and selling of government securities and bonds in the open market by central bank. See, government securities are being held by RBI. RBI is dealing with the government securities. So, at the time of inflation, what will be the reaction? RBI will sell the government securities in order to reduce the credit capacity to offer loans. That is the role at the time of inflation. Means during inflation, RBI will sell the government security. That is the main case. But during at the time of deflation, what will be the case? If at this time that is selling, so at this time they will be purchasing the government security from commercial bank, and ultimately it will increase the credit capacity to offer loans. Now, how does government securities is reducing the credit capacity? See, when the government securities are sold to commercial bank has to pay to the RBI. Now, if they have paid to the RBI, so how can they give loan to customers then? So capacity to offer loans reduces. Similarly, during deflation, when government securities are being purchased by RBI from the commercial bank receives excess amount. Commercial bank is having more liquidity, and in that case, it increases the capacity to offer loans to the public. So simple. At the time of inflation, RBI will sell the government securities, and at the time of deflation, RBI will purchase the government securities. That is open market operation. Now moving on to the next is cash reserve ratio. Now what is cash reserve ratio, students? The ratio of bank deposit that the commercial bank is required to keep with the central bank of its deposit in the form of gold or other deposits. Again, RBI uses this as CRR. RBI uses the CRR either to check the excess liquidity or release fund from time to time. Now, this portion has to be deposited with the RBI. Okay, it is the ratio of the bank deposits. Maybe suppose 5%, maybe suppose 6%, maybe suppose 7%, that decided by RBI, and that percentage of total deposits you have to keep with the Reserve Bank of India. So RBI can use CRR also. See here, example is given. Suppose CRR is 4.25. So total deposits are 100. So RBI, you have to keep 4.25% of your total deposits with the RBI in form of CRR. Okay, that slides are made on 2012. So CRR at that moment was 4.25. Now you can search it on the Google. What is the current CRR? Now inflation, again at the time of inflation, CRR will be increased, and at the time of deflation, CRR will be decreased. As you can see in the PowerPoint presentation itself, beta, when there is inflation, the CRR is raised. RBI raises the rate of cash reserve ratio. This reduces the lending capacity because they have to deposit more amount to the RBI. Now coming to deflation, it is reducing the rate of cash reserve ratio. Again, you have to reduce the CRR in order to increase the lending capacity of commercial bank. So again, your particularly CRR is reduced. Again, same fundamental. I for inflation, I for increase. So at inflation, CRR will be increased. D for deflation, D for decrease. So in deflation, CRR will be decreased. That is the main fundamental related with inflation and deflation. Okay. Now moving on to the SLR. What is SLR, students? SLR we have already studied in money and banking. Again, this is that portion, that is every bank is required to hold a certain minimum portion of its total deposits in liquid form of gold, cash or other approved securities which can be converted into cash immediately, or they are considered as near to cash asset. Okay, they are considered as near to cash assets. Now why this has been kept? Because of the depositors which are coming to withdraw the amount. Now this amount you have to maintain as the commercial bank. ये आपको RBI को deposit नहीं करना. SLR is to be kept with the commercial bank for their own purpose for the customers. Take for the example, if 23% is SLR, so अगर total deposit आपके 100% है, तो 77% आप loans दे सकते हो, लेकिन 23% आपको अपने पास रखना पड़ेगा. Why? Because for the current demand of the consumer if they come to withdraw. So this was the case of SLR. Now in SLR also, beta, what the RBI will do? First, they will increase the SLR in the case of inflation so as to reduce the credit availability. Suppose 23 से 25% पे लेके आ रहे हैं. Again, previously, now in coming to deflation, they will decrease the SLR so that ultimately what will happen? Money supply increases. So again, same fundamental, I for inflation, I for increase. So at the time of inflation, SLR will be increased. At the time of deflation, SLR will be decreased. That is D for deflation and D for decrease. Okay, students. Hope you are able to understand this particular fundamentals from money and banking. See, it is related to money and banking directly. Now, moving on to the margin requirements. Now, what is margin? It is the difference between the value of security and the amount borrowed against that security. RBI can fix difference between the margin requirement. I have an example. Suppose total asset value is 100. So RBI has asked a margin of 20%. Suppose you want to purchase a house that is of 100 CR. Just an example. Okay. And RBI will has given that on home loan 20% margin should exist. So whenever you will go to the bank will not sanction the whole amount. Bank will sanction only 80%. That 20% margin has to be maintained. ओके, सो 20% मार्जिन आपको करना पड़ेगा, मेंटेन करना पड़ेगा. दैट 20% मार्जिन इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन द वैल्यू ऑफ सिक्योरिटी एंड अमाउंट बोरोड अगेंस्ट दैट सिक्योरिटी. Suppose you are giving gold loans. You have heard about gold loans. So whenever you are going to give your gold, the bank will not sanction the whole amount of gold as a loan. Mudra loan we have heard about. So out of the gold loan, suppose if the gold is of 1 lakh, so the bank will only sanction you a loan of 80,000 and 20,000 they have kept as a margin amount, which is as termed as security. Okay, so this is the margin. Now what will be the effect under inflation and deflation? Again, at the time of inflation, RBI raises the margin requirement so that borrowers does not get more loan amount. Borrowers will get less loan if margin requirements are increased. Suppose it was 30%, now it is 40%. So you will only get 60% of your value of asset. Okay. Now coming to deflation, RBI will reduce the margin requirement, or RBI, suppose it was first 30%, now RBI has gone to 10%. So RBI will reduce so that more loan amount comes to the customer, or borrowers will get more credit against their security. Again, same funda. Inflation के time, I for inflation, increase the margin. D for deflation, decrease the margin. Okay, that is decreasing the margin during the deflation. So same fundamental here also you can apply. It is I for inflation, increase. During inflation, increase the margin, and during deflation, decrease the margin. Next, coming to student, is moral suasion. Now, what is moral suasion? It refers to written or oral advice given by central bank to commercial bank to restrict and expand the credit. During inflation, it persuade members to not advance the credit for speculative. Okay, it will disallow banks from entering into certain transaction so that the money supply gets reduced. Okay, again, why these are known as qualitative? Because RBI will not state the quantity in this, they will only guide. During deflation, they will persuade members to advance the credit for speculation purpose. Also, they will allow banks from entering into certain transaction. Okay, means RBI is liberal in this case, and during deflation they have to increase the money supply, so they are not restricting the bank from entering into certain transaction. Credit rationing is what? Now, credit rationing means fixation of credit limits for different business activity for a particular business sector. Maybe suppose if the RBI has fixed a quota, suppose RBI fixed a quota for real estate or for other purpose business activity, and if that quota is been fulfilled, so the bank will not be able to give loans again to real estate. So in that case, during inflation, RBI reduces the quota for a particular sector, suppose like real estate, during credit inflation. Okay, and during deflation, beta, RBI increases the quota. कि suppose पहले आपने quota बना के रखा था कि 100 crores का ही quota रहेगा real estate का, इसके ऊपर आप loan नहीं दे सकते. But यहाँ पे if the deflation is going on, they can say now you can go to real estate by 150 CR. They are increasing the quota. Again, increasing quota will increase the money supply in the market. So main focus on deflation was to increase the money supply. So here, as we have come to the end of the monetary policy, students, we have monetary policy completed. From next lecture, I will be taking fiscal policy, students. Thank you, students, for listening to today's lecture. From next lecture, I will be going for fiscal policies. Do write the notes and send me a PDF of your completed notes, completed till monetary policy. Thanks for listening, students.